We have a jam-packed show today. At 10:10, we'll be joined by Edward Lemon. And for those of you who don't know, Eve and Edward run book fairs around the country. They are a dynamic duo, and having observed book fairs, I don't know, 50 years, 57 years actually. It's like everything else in life. There are cycles. And right now they're at their, game at the top of a cycle that's really doing very well. They're running shows around the country. And they're doing very well with it. We're not talking though about the book fairs today, although we'll mention them for sure. But what we are going to talk about is something called Books Wanted. In the past, Books Wanted was how the antiquarian book dealer in pre-computer days made their living. To the people in the audience that are listening and saw the promo of today's show, I want you to look at some of the images in that promo as you're listening to the show. And for those of you who are going to be seeing us when we transfer this to YouTube, I'm going to hold this up to, oh, wait a minute, what is wrong here? Okay, there we go. I'm going to hold this up to the screen. This is the A.B. Bookman's Weekly. Was the A.B. Bookman's Weekly. And the want ads were based on this premise, okay? A want ad could have been a full page want ad. As a matter of fact, Gunson and Turner Books had 5 or 6 full pages of books that they wanted. Want ads could have been as simple as a box ad. If you look at this is how we learned. Until you got this magazine, I didn't know the word Derrydale Press. That's how you learn. It was a learning process. But the bread and butter was where dealers advertise. So let's say somebody wanted in a store this book, The First Battle. It's like a $20 book. It's not the book, it's what we're going to describe with it. So let's say in the A.B. Bookman's Weekly, somebody wanted this book. The dealer who advertised there would say, you'd have their address and how to correspond with them. The book dealer that wanted this book was named Charles Lochner. Did anybody know him out there? I'd love to know about this guy if anyone knew the name. He was in Jeffersonville, Vermont, and another place. But what happened was this. Somebody wrote this postcard to him. And in particular, this was the Yankee, let me make sure I got that right, the Yankee trader who was well known in quoting at that time. And what they did was you wrote out a postcard using bibliographic terminology, abbreviations, and such. And that dealer, Mr. Lochner here, who asked for quotes about these cards, could have gotten only these 2 cards, a couple of hundred of them. The circulation of the magazine was 12,000. So he got the card. There are several cards, but let's say for argument's sake, Susan McConnell. If anyone knows Susan McConnell, I'll send her this as a gift, or give it to Edward and Eve. Maybe they can play with it. I love toys like this. It illustrates stuff. So they sent this card, and on the back, he decided, okay, I like these the best. So out of all the cards, you got the check. Basically, this process took almost 6 weeks to actually complete a deal. You mailed the postcard back then. This postcard was dated 1969. So it took 4 or 5 days for the postcard to get there, a week. Okay, now you got to give the guy 2 weeks to get all the quotes. He could have gotten 100 postcard quotes on that. Then he decides, based on who he knew, who had the best price, best reputation. You were your reputation back then. There were no computers, and he sent that person a check. Well, that took about 6 weeks by the time he got the book in hand, and the transaction isn't over until he gets the book in hand. So it took quite a while. It was a complicated process. What Edward has done is brought back the beef, the want list itself. So if you are a bookstore in a certain area, and you can't find books, maybe someone has it. Yeah, you can go online and search ad all and this and that, but you don't know who you're buying from. Sometimes maybe you do. This is direct dealer to dealer quoting. So let's say you read what, is posted in this Books Wanted and you have that book, you set up whatever we're going to discuss, how you contact each other. Obviously, it'll be by computer, no more postcards. No postcards. God, we have, I'm going to guess about 100 stacks of postcards from the post office with 10 cent, 5, or whatever prices on them. It's really funny. And so that brings me into the next topic that we're going to also be talking about, and that's philatelic history. Now, I made a little error in the promo. Leven Parker will join us. Leven um, more into postal history than stamp collecting, and this library that we acquired was nothing. I mean, with postal history up the yin yang, just amazing stuff. So we're going to be talking with Ed Lemon and Levin Parker throughout the show. At about 11:10, we're going to be joined by Big House Books. If you are, if you have a lot of books that you want to get rid of, and want them to go to a good cause, Big House Books is trying to put libraries in prisons. And for those of you who saw the little joke that I made out of the donation we made, let me tell you the story for those who don't. Years ago, we gave 4,000 books to the Dade County Correctional System, Turner Guilford, I think it was called. And at that time, we had been buying books at the county store by the pallet. We literally bought 10,000 books, and I was renting almost a dozen warehouses at the time. So anyway, about 4,000 of those books were good, but not the kind of book we want in a bookstore. It would be perfect for a public or a prison library. So we contacted them, and they took it. Unbeknownst to me, I found this out a couple of weeks later. There was an emerging author that had that was part of the traveling book exhibit that we bought at the Dade County store. And Pat Conroy, at the time these books were published, 1960s, I think late 60s or so, was an author who's very popular today. And Pat Conroy wrote a book called The Water is Wide. I read the blurb on it, and I said to myself, who wants to read stories by teachers? Nothing personal teachers. It just, there were so many other non-fiction and art books and other things that were there that it didn't impress me. Well, a couple of weeks later or so, I found out that the couple of copies that I had donated in there were worth about $125 each at the time, and I'm pretty sure The Water is Wide is still up there. I just didn't pay attention, and I just noticed. Ed, welcome to. Edward Lemon has just joined us. Edward and Eve Lemon are very well
Hi,
known.
Steve.
Hi, Edward. They're very well known for the fantastic job they do in promoting book fairs. I have seen like the local estate sale people in our area, some come, some go. You guys are on a climb. What you're doing in the book fair scene is just fantastic. You've got the right idea on how to promote shows. And if anybody's looking to do antiquarian book fairs, which is not necessarily what we're going to be talking about right now, then you've got to know Eve and you've got to know Edward. But Edward has come up with a phenomenal idea that I described. So that we just described to you. and that is Books Wanted. So, Edward, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and ask you this question. What got both of you kind of started, or you specifically started in the wonderful world of rare books? And how did this phenomenal Books Wanted program come into mind?
Well, we came into the world of rare books as collectors, and so we were accumulating a lot of kind of rare material. We collect literary first, and that kind of gave us our entry point into the world of rare books, and that led us to build relationships with lots of collectors. And then back in 2022, we're based in Washington D.C., and the long-running Washington D.C. Rare Book Fair died with COVID, and the promoter didn't want to pick it up again, and so that's what led us to do our first book fair. And then it was successful, and so we've gone on to promote them in other cities in the United States. But
How many fairs are you
coming at this
doing
from
now?
collecting is kind of how we came to. We're doing this year 5 fairs. Our next fair is in New York, and then we're going to St. Louis, Philadelphia, and then we've announced an Atlanta fair for end of February, beginning of March 2026. So we're
Wow.
continually adding to our repertoire.
So, how did this idea come about? It's a phenomenal idea. Kudos to you on it.
Well, the idea came about again because of our book collecting, and there was a particular book by a British author, Hugh Walpole, who was one of the most popular authors of the first half of the 20th century, but ultimately has been largely forgotten today. And we are collectors of his works, his first editions. You know, we're trying to accumulate all his first editions signed in jackets if they exist. And there was one book that he self-published for his friends, only 150 copies, called Extracts from a Diary. And this is a book we've been looking for over a decade, a book that there was one online copy about 2 years ago that we missed somehow. And so we wanted to give a platform for individuals to find these very, very rare materials and have a bulletin board that dealers and collectors and others within the rare book world could come to find these very rare materials. And so we posted, we want this book, Extracts from a Diary, as an example of the model that we were trying to develop. And within minutes, we'd received a message from a dealer who just catalogued someone's collection and literally hadn't put anything online at this point, and said, "Hey, I think I have the book you're looking for." And lo and behold, here it is. I have it in my hand, the book we've been looking for over a decade. We managed to secure. And so that's really the first success story of the Book Wanted database. But really, it's supposed to be a place for people who are looking for very rare materials to post about that, so that they can hopefully connect with people who have those rare materials.
Now, you can be reached. All the information on this is at findfairs.com. Is that correct? You're freezing.
Section of the website, and you can just submit the book that you want, and then we will list it for you.
Okay, that's my question. This is going to be the equivalent of an online version. The theme is the same of this. Okay. How will it work? In other words, this, let's say it wasn't instantaneous. Somebody wants book A. We can use any example, book A. Dealer has book A. Wants to let the dealer that wants it know they have it. So in this methodology, it was postcards and, the mailman. How does it work? I, as a dealer, contact you and say, I have a want list of these books. What would that person be doing from there?
So if you don't mind your information being public, then we would put your email and contact details so that people could directly contact you if they have the books or have any leads on the books. If you don't want to make your information public, we can also list ourselves as the contact. Findbookfairs@gmail.com is our email, and people can email us if they have the book, and then we would connect them privately with that individual. So a kind of matchmaking service.
And
Yeah.
and you have to subscribe to both sides of the service. I'm asking if that question, if that makes sense. You're a dealer that wants to find books, or you're a dealer that is looking for a book, or you're a dealer that's responding to a quote. So how would that work? Is that, I mean, obviously email and electronic correspondence and payment, but how many people, like in other words, I'm trying to make an analogy between what we did with postcards and how it would happen today. Obviously, we're not using postcards. So this is all kind of email, PayPal, and it's all done and over?
Yeah, no, I mean we're just offering a service just to match people with books.
Gotcha,
Where
gotcha.
we're not charging anything for that transaction. It's really just a way to try and support the trade, support both
Uh,
sellers and obviously collectors in particular. Given
And
we've come at this business from the perspective of being collectors,
is
and
there
some
a
of the
fee? Is there a fee on either side?
in that material.
Is there a
There's
fee
no
on
fee.
either?
No.
No fees. It's okay. How many right now, approximately? Are there hundreds? Are there, how many books? If I wanted to look at the site right now, how many books would I used to call reading the AB a dramatic reading of the phone book, so to speak. I mean, it was literally with three columns, looked like a phone book. Is that what it will look like online?
Well, we launched it last week, so we're about a week into it, and I think we have about 40 books or 40 posts online so far. Obviously, we keep on receiving new requests to upload new posts on an almost daily basis. So at the moment, it's not very sophisticated, but I think we're going to now move it onto a platform which is more searchable, where you can search by author, where you can search by title, to make it a little bit more interactive and easy. At the moment, it's the kind of very old school. Like in a magazine, it's just a list of different items that people are after. But I think we're going to try and make it more advanced, and given it been so successful so far.
I hear you. I mean, that's what it needed. It needed an updating. And, I think you're going to do very well with this. There's the potential that this could suddenly become a major product, and you might want to think about monetizing it, because I think there's going to be a lot of, unless it's on automatic, so to speak, there's going to be a lot of, work to be done with it. Um, I want to be a devil's advocate, okay?
Please do.
When the computers started, my lack of computer knowledge is legendary. Okay, I didn't think they would last, but I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Oh, this is bad. I got a twisted thought and I can't pull the words together. We're gonna go to break. I'll figure it out when I come back. Okay.
Now, here's Steve the Bookman Eisenstein.
Welcome back, my fellow rare bookians. We are talking with Edward Lemon of Eve and Edward of FineFairs.com. And Edward has come up with a new online feature for rare bookies, and it's an emulation in modern times of what was the quoting system, where you as a book dealer have a book, another specific dealer wants it, and this system puts you all in touch. So here's that devil's advocate question. I was able to put it in words now. When the AB died, there was no more searching, and computers were new, so it was different. When my program first started, this show started about 10 years ago, we talked about things like the search service and all that. And what I thought was, and that with Adall or Biblio or any of the other sites, somebody's looking for a book they've been looking for 20 years. They punch in the right, commands to the computer, and, the next morning there's 20 printouts of where you might be able to find that book today. That's my devil's advocate question.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're definitely right. Of course, as you say, with the advent of the internet, of course, it's become much easier to find materials. You've got Via Libre, you've got Biblio, you've got Books, you've got Google, and so I think we are supplementing that. Not everything gets listed on all of those websites. Not all dealers, of course, have online catalogs. I mean, a lot of the dealers who we work with, they don't have an online presence, but they may remember that they have a book that is part of their catalog. Obviously, other things like the item that we acquired through this service. That wasn't even listed online at this point, so it might be an opportunity for individuals to get access to books before they hit the market, for example. So we're not saying we're going to be able to find everyone's book. We're not saying we're going to be able to, that they won't be able to find the books they're looking for elsewhere. We're just trying to supplement the existing products that are out there.
Yeah, yeah. And it sound with the U Walpole, I mean, that's a very target market. You said there's 40 people so far that are subscribing, enlisting in this subscribing since there's no charge. I'm not quite sure which word would use. Um, how many books are those 40 people asking for right now? Ballpark.
Most are asking for one, or some people are asking for a series of books, or they have a particular interest in a particular author. So it varies a little bit. We're flexible insofar as people can list an individual book, or they can say they're interested in the works of a certain individual in jacket or from a certain period. So we're quite flexible in that regard. But yeah, I'd say it's probably 60 or so books from those 40 people.
What there's a possibility that this could really grow much bigger than you even in your wildest dreams. That's where I'm going with this right now. What then?
Well, that's what we hope. That's what we hope. Obviously, as I say, we're going to maybe overhaul the platform, eventually, maybe even transition it to a separate website potentially, and make it more searchable. But we're hoping, obviously, it would be a useful product for individuals who are still trying to find those very rare items. I think it's really for people who are trying to find items that won't be appearing on books, won't be appearing on Biblio. There won't be 10 copies. It's not things like a first edition Huck Finn. You can go online and find lots of those. It's for something, probably people who are looking for even more obscure items.
If you know off the top of your head, and they're not expected to remember it, but what is some of, the U Walpole I get? That's one of those books, like, as popular as he was more, there's popularity, but it's like um, not John, Masefield and all those other British writers that had all these limited editions back then. What other kind of books are people asking for, I guess? And is it going to be only rare? I mean, these are all questions. I'd love to sit in on one of your meetings one day just to toss out questions out of the box.
Yeah, there's a mixture. I mean, a number of people have asked for a first edition of Frankenstein. That seems to be very popular.
Wow.
And that's obviously quite rare and quite high value. There's someone who's asked for Toni Morrison. There are individuals who've asked for kind of early American printings of various religious materials. Individuals who've asked for kind of incunable and kind of early modern manuscript material. Again, I don't speak them, so I won't try and pronounce the titles. But it runs the gamut from very rare and very expensive through to items that perhaps aren't quite as rare or aren't quite as valuable. So we're open to kind of anyone's request.
I got a question, and I'll answer the question, and then it's your turn. Okay. Edie and I met at a garage sale. How did you and Eve meet? Because it's unusual that both are rare bookies or both have the mutual enthusiasm in the field. So how did you guys meet?
Well, we met at the University of St Andrews about 15 years ago, where we were both graduate students, and we certainly did connect over our love for books, particularly. I remember our love for Anne of Green Gables. We have a collection of Ella Montgomery. First
Uh,
edition. We went on our honeymoon to Prince Edward Island, where the books are set. We're actually going there again next week for our summer holiday. So we did connect over our love of books and literature and history.
what do you see as the
Developed
future?
our collection together.
What do you see as the future of the business? I mean, when we do book fairs, we're kind of encouraged. I only do one book fair a year these days, but it's encouraging. Do you see the same thing in the other regions? Because you're all over the, Eastern Sea. Are you on the West Coast with anything with shows yet? No,
Not on the West
okay.
Coast. We've moved into the Midwest. We did Indianapolis as our first Midwestern fair in April, and then we're doing St. Louis in October. And we were very happy with the interest there. And I think across the board we're very excited to see lots of younger people, children, teenagers, university students, and others. I think as they've grown up, mostly interacting these days with computers, tablets, and so on and so forth. I think they're very interested in the physical material. And so, yeah, I'm personally enthusiastic. Obviously, different things are going in and out of fashion. Certain things are more appealing to newer collectors, but I think overall, I'm optimistic that that the rare book world will continue to, of course, have to adapt to the times. But I think there are a lot of younger people who are getting into collecting and taking an interest in having books and paper in their homes.
Hey, Lev, I see you there. We find from the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, which is, the only fair I can talk about of the last couple of years, that 20% in the volume of the audience is younger, newer. Um,
Mhm.
not last year, but the year before that, we had a lot of people that were into rebinding. Edie asked one kid, "What are you going looking for?" And he said, "Banned books." So there's a lot of hope out
Mhm.
there. A lot of hope
Mhm.
out there. Let me introduce everybody. Levin Parker, Edward Lemon, Levin Parker. That's the tough one to say fast, I think. I'm not going to try. Welcome to the show. Let me introduce Levin, and then I'm going to let him kind of tell his own story. Levin and I met sometime in the last week or so. As you know, we picked up this major estate on Miami Beach. It literally took 3 months to get everything out of the house and into the warehouse. And we've been going at it ever since. Every day, I open up an envelope and there's envelopes in it that, like, okay, Levin, before I introduce you, I got a personal question.
Yes.
Peckham. Does the name Peckham as an engraver ring a bell? Philatelic engraving?
It sounds familiar, but honestly, I'm not that deep into the history of stamp engravers. There are a lot of guys that did designs, and I couldn't speak with any authority on it.
When we go to break in a few minutes, I'm looking at the envelope over there. I'll show it to you. You'll recognize the stamps, I think, and go from there. But as I asked every guest, you are not a stamp dealer. You're into postal history,
Right.
meaning literature and all the other stuff. Talk to us about that. How did you get started in it? what do you know, you're obviously in business. What are you looking for to buy and sell? Because our audience goes to estate sales all the time, and while usually the family stamp album you find is garbage, every once in a while it can have a tremendous amount of either very usable postage or, some kind of one rare stamp from some country that you never heard of before. So what got you started, and what are you doing with it today?
Well, first of all, I appreciate being on. I think it's really interesting
Pleasure.
to do this show. But yeah, a little bit of a misnomer about what postal history is. That books about postal mail and all that is actually its own category of postal literature. But postal history is the collecting of covers and letters and interpreting the actual markings on the envelopes and placing them historically. That's what I do. I'm a postal historian. So I collect covers, which sounds like a really odd distinction from stamps, but it's almost its own different category. It kind of lives at the intersection of stamps and ephemera and rare manuscripts. It's a really fantastic way to collect. I mean, first of all, because they're everything is unique. Absolutely every item has gone through the mail in a different manner. And so, aside from your mass commercially produced things, there's no way to have a catalog. So, it forces you to be an old school, refined collector where you have to really be able to make judgments about each item because there's no book you can go to that will accurately be able to describe, the intersection of the stamps that are on it and the markings that are on it, the route that it took, its placement in history. It's a really interesting area, and I think it's really the future of stamp collecting, in my opinion. I know a lot of stamp collectors disagree with that, but I think that it's really interesting. And I think that the more, speaking to what you and Edward were talking about, the more you see AI take off and the more you see this blurring of lines between what's real and not real, what's not real, I think you're going to see people reaching out for those things that are tangible, like old mail and old books. And all of those things that really affirm reality rather than having to question every image that you see on the internet. I think there will be an upsurgence you'll see that'll be in reaction to this AI stuff.
I a friend of my one of my mentors, going back to my Long Island days, and I were talking about this guy as a collector. I actually knew him years ago, by coincidence. My friend, my mentor, my friend for life, Harvey Stanson, Stan Book, shout out, buddy. Um, said something that I thought was an interesting comment. This was a stamp collector gone hog wild. I mean, he had a firearms collection, a stamp collection, an 1859 Sharps rifle, some Colt semi-auto, then a caliber as a firearms so-called expert that I might be. I never heard of. Notes left breadcrumbs on everything. This cancellation, and now that you're talking about covers, I think I might have things that you're interested in because one of the notebooks, in the front of the notebook, it says this was lot number 256 through 324, whatever the numbers were. And what were they? Letters home from a Spanish American War soldier to mom, pop. He made some marginal notes on some, they were all in cut, the envelopes were all in protective plastics, but on the plastics, this letter was underwater for a while on this ship. And, then you're talking about the roots, he's talking about rare cancellation to see. I, I
And
didn't,
well, and all of those things are subspecialties because you have
yeah,
ship cancels, you have Spanish American War collectors, you have crash cover collectors. Crash covers are one of my absolute most fascinating. One of my favorite covers. I'm from Wyoming, and at the time, the worst airmail crash in the world was on Elk Mountain in 1947. And they picked up all the mail. It happened late January, and they were picking up mail all the way into February. And if you've been at 12,000 feet, which is what Elk Mountain is, because the plane actually hit the peak and it hit it so hard the fuselage rolled up and over the top and down the opposite side.
well,
But they were picking up mail at 12,000 feet in February. Um, and just getting guys up there to pick up mail shows you how dedicated the postal service really is, and they all have markings showing that they were in that plane crash. But all of those different, like every cover has different specialties within it because the volume of the different things you can collect is astonishing.
Cancellations, okay. I was talking to somebody. We were talking. I know there's value in cancellations and all of that. We found again an envelope within an envelope. It had 11 cancellation, the rubber inserts, the check from places that were, the canal zone, other military bases, things like that. Did we lose you, Levin?
No, I'm right here.
Oh, okay. No, all right. I say, yeah, okay. So this, we're gonna hit a break. I'll be back. We'll be back after these words.
Now, here's Steve the Bookman Eisenstein.
Welcome back, my fellow Rare Bookians. Got questions for my guest or for yours truly? Fortunes told, questions answered. Take out something to write with. We give preference if you use a Mont Blanc pen, but we'll ask you for the serial number on it. 888-575-4394. That's the number to communicate with us on air. Tell us, ask us questions. Tell us about what you're doing in the rare book business. 888-575-4394. A little later in the program, we're going to be doing a trivia contest question. And in honor of our guest, today's prize will be $50 worth of, $25 worth of usable postage stamps. We will mail you an envelope, and you can have the next $25 of postage for free when you mail a book. Still charge them for postage, though, okay? And on that note, Ed, I'm going to start with you. For those that would just be joining us, give us a description of the book's wanted site you are developing, how they can get there. And then when Ed describes that, Levin, after Edward's description of the service, how would you, as a postal history aficionado, use that service? And I'm trying to focus in a little more on what you do. So I want to talk about philatelic books and how they may or may not fit in your life after that. Take it away, Ed.
Yeah, so the Books Wanted database is housed at findfairs.com. The goal is to give collectors, dealers, those in the rare book world or ephemera world, the collecting world in general, an opportunity to post items that they are particularly that are very rare and that they've not been able to find, that maybe they've Googled and searched on other websites and not been able to find their kind of most wanted items. And then the goal is that we can connect them, hopefully, with dealers and others who have those items so that they can find the treasures that they are after. So you submit through the online form on our website, and then we post online the item that you're looking for, and then hopefully we connect you with that item and you find it.
Would you say most of the items that have been asked for so far are high end or exceptionally hard to find? Rare isn't always expensive. We all know that, okay? So, rare is probably one of the most misused words in our vocabulary, the vocabulary of beginners, in that sense. But would you say that most of these would be higher end books?
I would say, as I said, before Frankenstein first edition is the
Yeah,
item that's
yeah.
been asked for. Right? That's obviously a kind of that's a 5-figure book. But people have asked for other books that that maybe are rare. The item that we found, as I said before, through this service, which was a book we've been looking for over a decade, didn't cost us a tremendous amount of money because again, it's rare, but there aren't too many people who are looking for one of the 100
Yeah,
copies that were originally printed. So I'd say it's certainly you can submit anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be a very expensive item. It can just be an item that you've been looking for that you haven't been able
if
to
it's
find.
not if I understand privileged information, confidentiality, anonymity, those kind of things that come with being an appraiser. So if you can't answer this question for those kind of reasons, I understand it. But what was the price range of that Hugh Walpole book?
It was in the, it was in the three figures, but
Okay, it was in
let's
the
say
hundreds.
mid three figures. I mean, it was reasonable money, of course, not inexpensive, but we weren't talking really
Yeah,
tremendous amount.
it's funny because if I once did an analogy, a study, so to speak. We had picked up the library, no joke, Sophie Tucker's piano player, Ben Shapiro. The nephew told me that Ben won all these limited edition books in a poker game because the guy didn't have. So I had multiple copies. I believed it was that. When I saw that you Walpole book, that's an unmistakable color and size on that book. I think I had that at one time. But in it was all these Galsworthys and everything. And Galsworthy, the way they made the analogy that I read it, was that Galsworthy's books were going for the equivalent of $300 and $400 today in the 30s. But when it came time to finally sell those books somewhere in the mid 90s at the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, I had a collapsible bookshelf, all limited editions of that type. I think it was $10 each or six for $50, something like that. I mean, so I was very curious what Walpole went for. Leven, you've
Hmm.
heard the description. So let me kind of one of the things that we hope happens when people are on the show is they get contacted off air, on air, you know, by people that have things that they're looking for. Levin, what is it in postal history? I mean, I knew somebody who worked for the post office. They collected scales. They collected miniature mailboxes. They collected this, that, and the other. So I know you are into the covers and, those kind of things. But let's go into philatelic literature.
Hmm.
Are there things that you would be looking for that this service might find them because you can't?
Definitely, and there are definitely some philatelic items. I mean, it's actually shocking. Possibly the only comparison to it is rare books, but the amount of writing that has been done about stamps is mind-boggling. There are multiple massive libraries that are maintained on philatelic literature, but there's even more recent stuff. I can tell you the thing that converted me to postal history from stamp collecting was a sale held in 2011 called the Risvold sale. It's a three-volume set. It's a gorgeous book. I can pull it out at some point if you want here. But
Sure, sure. This goes on to everybody, just so you guys know. This goes to YouTube. When we're done, the studio has a YouTube channel. And if you go to WDBF Radio on YouTube, you'll be able to find Bucks on the Bookshelf, and this program's on there.
but the Risvold sale, the way he collected was a westward expansion collection. So he starts at the frontier in Connecticut and New York, and he moves with the mails across the West as the United States expands. So all of the mail is coming from the frontier of America, and it is still one of my favorite books that I have ever read, and it reads like a history of the United States, but it's all done with the items from his collection. And so, like my prize items, I'm a Wyoming collector primarily, and I do get a lot of, well, not a lot because there's not a lot out there, but Oregon Trail letters, Indian War letters. Uh,
Well,
I mean, very, very early, very interesting stuff. But I do find things from rare book dealers as well as ephemera dealers that I'm very interested in because oftentimes you'll have postal markings on old newspapers, on old books, on old letters, on old manuscripts that can enhance the value of an item. And oftentimes, the antiquarian book dealers aren't necessarily familiar with what those postal markings are or whether they're common or not.
that's the thing. So, how, Levin, how can people reach you off air? You know, they may not have what you are looking for exactly, but there's a lot of people that are going to have questions that, you know, related to that. Maybe they do have what you're looking for. Most of the time when you find the family stamp album in an estate sale, it's garbage. But I'll give you a quick clue, everybody out there that goes to estate sales and yard sales. There's two things that I look for, and I have some, you know, a little more knowledge than the average person, but I am no expert by any means in philately. Um, what you're looking for in these older stamp albums is simple to find. The earliest stamp. So let's say you have the country Abadabajan. You know, I mean, how, you know, I also think stamp collecting should be a course in school because you need a prop to teach kids today. And then that's how I learned history besides in school, was through the stamp album. So if you see a stamp album and the first two or three stamps of that country are in there, hopefully mint and not hinged, you know, you might have something very collectible. The other thing is, I learned this late, probably about 15 years ago. Look through the albums to see if there's any usable postage in it. We estimated a price of just under $200 for a collection we bought at a yard sale, and it turned out to have $1,700 worth of usable postage. You know, on the other end of it, quote me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. Any stamp that's 49 cents or less today, a dealer, if you wind up with a lot of usable postage, a dealer will pay 35% of face under 50 cents.
Well, but
And
there's a huge caveat on that. Most of the
go
dealers
ahead.
pay that high. They expect a minimum of 5 grand. They expect to see a minimum of 5 grand in postage,
Oh, wow.
pay that price.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not worth them dealing because unlike a lot of collectibles where you deal on very thin margins like bullion, and I know it's not true for rare books because like postal historians, you have to hold on to stuff for quite a while oftentimes before it'll actually sell. But they're not accustomed to that percentage game that like a coin dealer would be accustomed to. And so unless it's a big enough lot that they can unload right away, most of them aren't willing to do that kind of work for because they're going to sell it for 40%. So they're making 5% on the deal, and it's just not worth most of their time to count postage in the interest of, making that kind of money.
I learned that the hard way. $500 was what they started out at 250. By the time I got to 250, I said, I'm never doing this again. And
Yeah.
then I got a call. Wait, make it 500. And now I know I'm never doing it again. And personally, I have more fun creating custom envelopes to some guy in Texas with, you know, cattle ranching on the envelope. Um, I'm looking at the clock. We're going to hit a break in a minute. When we come back, Ed, somewhere when we come back in the first couple of minutes, before Big House Books comes on, think of a trivia question, okay? Book related trivia question. We'll
Got it.
be okay. Thanks. We're almost there. We will be back very shortly after these commercial words. And one of the other things that we're going to talk about when we come back, Ed, is book fair dates. Go ahead, take it away, Captain Hook. Commercial in.